The metal detector screamed the moment the man in the shredded military coat stepped through the courthouse doors. Security froze. Hands hovered over holsters. And for a split second, everyone in that echoing chamber believed a threat had just walked into Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom. But what lay hidden beneath that oversized coat wasn't a weapon. It was something far more powerful. Something that would break open a story of guilt, sacrifice, brotherhood, and ultimately redemption. No one in that room, not the young mother clutching her baby, not the businessman scrolling his phone, not even Judge Caprio himself had any idea that the next few minutes would alter a veteran's life, reunite a shattered family, and force an entire city to confront how it treats the men and women who served. Before we dive in, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. And if stories of compassion and justice inspire you, hit subscribe so you never miss what happens inside Judge Caprio's courtroom. Under the hum of flickering fluorescent lights, the morning session of Municipal Court 3B seemed like any other routine cases. Tired faces, the smell of old wood, and damp coats clinging to the air. Judge Frank Caprio flipped through his docket, adjusting his glasses with the familiar, unhurried grace of a man who had seen every kind of story walk through those oak doors. Parking violations, expired meters, missed court dates. Nothing on the page hinted at the emotional earthquake about to unfold. The bailiff, Officer Riley, stood with hands clasped behind his back, eyes scanning the room with quiet vigilance. A young mother bounced a fussy toddler on her knee. An older man in a suit checked his watch for the 5th time. 2 college students whispered over a shared notebook. Ordinary people with ordinary problems. Then the next case was called City of Providence versus Gabriel Thomas Turner. Failure to appear. 9 outstanding parking citations. A ripple of mild annoyance passed through the gallery. Another guy ignoring tickets, they thought. Another person wasting the court's time. No one looked up yet, but Judge Caprio did. He noticed the way the defendant moved, slow, careful, as if every step weighed more than his boots could carry. The man who stepped forward wore an olive-green field jacket bleached by weather and years. The corporal stripes on the sleeves were barely visible under frayed fabric. His jeans were stiff with wear, his boots cracked and uneven. His beard was unkempt, his eyes carved with sleepless nights, and in his hands he clutched a worn manila folder like a shield. "Good morning," Judge Caprio said, voice warm but firm. The man swallowed hard. "Morning, Your Honor. You are Mr. Gabriel Turner." "Yes, sir." Caprio studied him a moment longer. His rigid posture, the instinctive way he stood at attention despite his exhaustion, the faint tremor in his fingers. Something about him felt military, disciplined, familiar. "Mr. Turner, you have 9 unpaid parking tickets totaling $864, plus failure to appear. That's a significant amount. Can you explain what's going on?" Before Gabe could answer, a soft movement beneath his oversized coat drew Officer Riley's attention. Riley narrowed his eyes. Something under the jacket shifted ever so slightly. He made a mental note, but said nothing for now. Gabe cleared his throat. "I don't have an excuse, Your Honor. I take responsibility." His voice was rough, like someone who hadn't spoken much recently or had shouted too much in his past life. "That's a good start," Caprio replied, flipping through documents. "These tickets go back almost a year, all outside the VA hospital." Gabe's jaw clenched. "Yes, sir. You spend a lot of time there?" "Yes, Your Honor. Physical therapy, counseling sessions." The gallery grew quieter. Even the baby paused. Caprio leaned back in his chair. "Are you a veteran, Mr. Turner?" "Yes, sir. United States Army. 20 years. Afghanistan, Fallujah, Ramadi." A soft murmur passed through the benches. Caprio removed his glasses. "Thank you for your service." Gabe nodded, eyes low. "And where are you living now?" Silence. Gabe's fingers tightened on the manila envelope until the edges bent. His voice cracked when he finally answered. "In my van, sir. Been about 10 months now. The hush that followed was thick and heavy. Even Officer Riley's stern expression softened. Caprio inhaled slowly. And these tickets, were you leaving your van on the street while at the VA? Yes. The parking lot fills up before sunrise. And sometimes my appointments run long. Sometimes I forget to move it. Sometimes, he hesitated. Sometimes I'm in too much pain to walk back. Caprio nodded gently. Physical or emotional pain? Gabe's eyes glimmered with something raw. Both. A small tremor ran through his coat again. Riley shifted his stance. He was watching closely now. Caprio tapped his pen. Mr. Turner, may I ask what's in the envelope you're holding? Gabe looked down as if surprised to still have it. He stepped forward and handed it to the clerk, who passed it to the bench. The judge opened it. Inside were discharge papers, medical records, appointment slips, and photographs. Caprio lifted one photo carefully. It showed a younger Gabe, full of life, standing arm in arm with another soldier in the desert fatigues, both grinning despite the heat and dust. The back read, Brothers in Sand, L.A. Caprio looked up. Who is this? Gabe swallowed. Luis Alvarez. My best friend. We deployed together. Where is he now? Gabe's voice splintered. He didn't come home. He saved my life during an IED attack, covered me with his body. The room fell silent once more. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Caprio placed the photo down with reverence. I'm sorry for your loss. Gabe nodded but didn't speak. His hand shook as he reached to retrieve the picture. And as he leaned forward, his coat shifted again, this time more noticeably. A faint whimper escaped. Riley stepped forward sharply. Sir, what was that? Gabe froze. Caprio's eyes narrowed, not with suspicion but concern. Mr. Turner, what do you have under your coat? Gabe's gaze darted between the judge and the bailiff. Panic flooded his face. Two can explain. Riley's hand hovered near his belt. Sir, step back and open your coat slowly. Please, Gabe whispered, voice cracking. Don't hurt her. She's all I've got. Her, gasps echoed. Open it, Riley ordered. With trembling hands, Gabe unzipped the coat. In the makeshift sling beneath it lay a tiny golden retriever puppy thin, shivering but alive. Her fur was a patchwork of gold and cream, her eyes impossibly round. When the coat opened, she blinked at the light and let out a soft, heartbreaking yip. The courtroom erupted in stunned disbelief. Oh my God, she's adorable. Someone brought a puppy. Caprio blinked, stunned but visibly softening. Mr. Turner, he said gently, you brought a dog into my courtroom. Gabe looked mortified. I'm sorry, Your Honor. I found her behind an abandoned house 3 nights ago. Someone left her in an old crate. She was freezing. I couldn't leave her in my van. The windows don't close all the way. It's too cold. She might not survive. The puppy licked Gabe's thumb. What's her name? Caprio asked. Gabe smiled faintly for the first time. Grace, he whispered, because that's what she is. The room softened all at once. Even Riley relaxed, lowering his hand. Caprio leaned closer. May I? Gabe hesitated, then gently lifted the puppy. Grace sniffed the judge's fingers and immediately nuzzled his palm. A collective awe rippled across the benches. Caprio handed her back, then folded his hands. Mr. Turner, this court is here to serve justice, but justice without understanding is just paperwork. Gabe blinked away tears. I need to know more about your service, about your life before all this. And for the first time that morning, Gabe's voice carried not shame, but the weight of years he had never shared aloud. Gabe shifted in the witness chair, cradling Grace as if she were the last warm thing left in his world. The puppy curled deeper into his coat, her tiny chest rising and falling with soft, trusting breaths. Judge Caprio sat forward, elbows resting lightly on the bench, the way he always did when he was about to listen, not as a judge, but as a human being. Mr. Turner, he said quietly, tell me who you were, before life brought you here. Gabe blinked, as though the question felt foreign. Before, he echoed. Yes, Caprio replied. Not the battles, not the paperwork. You, the person behind all of this. Gabe stared down at his hands. His knuckles were scarred, his fingers calloused, his nails bitten. He ran a thumb over Grace's ear, grounding himself. I grew up in Pawtucket, he began slowly. Small house, 3 brothers. Dad worked construction. Mom cleaned offices at night. We didn't have much, but we didn't know any better. I was happy back then. The gallery listened in silence. I wasn't the best student, wasn't the worst. I just wanted to get out and do something that mattered, something bigger than me. So when I turned 18, I walked into the Army recruitment office and signed up. He paused. That was 26 years ago. Tell me about Afghanistan, Caprio said gently. Gabe shifted. His breathing grew uneven, not panicked but careful, like each memory was a grenade he had to disarm before speaking. It was hot, he said softly. Blistering. And loud. Everything was loud. Even when it was quiet, it was loud. No one in the room dared interrupt. But you learn to live with it. You learn routines. You wake up early. You check your gear. You joke with your squad because if you don't laugh, you'll break. And you learn to trust the man next to you more than anyone else on earth. His voice wavered. That's where I met Luis Alvarez. Caprio nodded. The soldier in the photo. Yes, sir. Luis was the kind of guy who made life bearable out there. Funny. Stubborn. Always singing off key. He hated the heat. Always said he'd rather shovel snow the rest of his life than spend one more day in the desert. A small smile crossed Gabe's face. We saved each other. More than once. Grace stretched in his lap, as if sensing his shift in emotion. But after the IED, Gabe's throat closed. We were en route clearance duty. Luis insisted on swapping seats with me that morning, said he needed a better angle on the road. I told him he was ridiculous. He told me to stop complaining. His eyes dropped. 2 minutes later, the explosion hit. The room hung on every word. When I came to, I couldn't hear anything. Just ringing. Dust everywhere. And Luis was on top of me. He'd thrown himself over me. Tears welled, but he forced himself steady. He saved my life. Gave up his so I could have mine. And I've spent every day since trying to figure out what to do with that. Caprio swallowed hard. That is a burden no one should carry alone. Gabe shook his head. There's more. Officer Riley crossed his arms, expression softening with each sentence. Even the businessman in the back lowered his phone, fully drawn in. When I got home, everything was different. Streets were too loud. Silence was too loud. I couldn't sleep, couldn't think, couldn't sit in a crowded room without wanting to bolt. My back was destroyed. Shrapnel still in there somewhere. I went to physical therapy, counseling, but the appointments never stopped. Some days I'd have 3 different ones, always at the VA. He exhaled shakily, and every time I parked outside, ticket. Caprio glanced at the stack of violations. I can see that. And I lost my job at a shipping warehouse 8 months ago. Too much lifting, too much pain. Without work, I lost my apartment. Moved into my van. I thought it'd be temporary, but months went by. Winter hit, prices went up, and suddenly the only place I could sleep without being forced out was at the edge of the VA lot. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand. I tried to keep moving the van every 2 hours. I really did. But sometimes, after a long appointment, I'd fall asleep, or have a panic attack and forget, or the medication made me groggy. And when I'd come back out, another ticket, another reminder that I was failing. Again. You weren't failing, Caprio said softly. Gabe stared at the floor. It felt like I was. Another rustle of his coat. Grace peeked her nose out, blinking at the judge as though recognizing his voice. Caprio smiled faintly. And this little one, where did you find her? A condemned house on Westminster. Someone left her in a crate out back. No food, no blanket. Just left her. Gabe's jaw tightened. She was shaking. I picked her up and she whimpered once and then just went limp, like she'd already given up. A few sniffles echoed in the gallery. I couldn't leave her. Not after everything I've seen, after losing Luis, after losing myself. I just couldn't lose her too. Grace yawned, oblivious to the weight of her own symbolism. She's the only thing that makes me feel human again, Gabe whispered. Caprio nodded slowly, absorbing every word. Riley stepped closer. Judge, we do need to address the violation of bringing an animal into the courthouse, but Caprio held up a hand. Officer Riley, I am aware of the municipal code. I am also aware that compassion does not require permission. Riley fell silent. Caprio turned back to Gabe. You said you live in your van. Where did you park last night? Behind the Dunkin' on Broad Street. Manager lets me stay some nights if I keep the place clean. And what did you eat yesterday? Gabe hesitated, embarrassed. Coffee in the morning, bag of chips around 3. Gave most of the turkey sandwich I had to Grace. A wave of raw sympathy washed through the benches. Caprio's jaw clenched not in judgment, but in heartbreak. Mr. Turner, he said gently, why didn't you ask for help? Gabe's eyes filled again. Because I'm supposed to be the strong one. The guy who survived, the soldier who came home. And I didn't want people to see how far I'd fallen. He stared at the puppy in his arms. She's the only one who doesn't look at me like I'm broken. Caprio let that hang in the air, the truth of it landing heavy and real. The judge reached for the envelope again, scanning the medical records, the discharge papers, the photo with Luis. Every line told a story that had been unfolding long before today. A story ignored by systems, by paperwork, by bureaucracy, but not by him. Finally, he looked up. Mr. Turner, have you ever been in trouble with the law before these tickets? Gabe hesitated. Once. Tell me. It was 2 years ago. A bar fight. I had a panic attack. Some guy grabbed my shoulder, thought I was ignoring him. I snapped. Didn't hurt him too badly, but enough. And what happened? I pled guilty. I was ashamed. Took the mandatory counseling, paid the fine. Haven't touched alcohol since. Caprio nodded. Thank you for telling the truth. The gallery remained utterly still. Grace shifted again, and Gabe adjusted her gently. Even in the heaviness of the moment, the sight of the tiny puppy nestled against the chest of a man who had seen too much felt like its own form of redemption. Caprio leaned back and exhaled, long, deliberate breath. Mr. Turner, he said softly, you're carrying more weight than any man should have to bear alone. And this court cannot and will not pretend otherwise. Gabe blinked rapidly, fighting emotion. Your Honor, I don't want pity. This isn't pity, Caprio interrupted. This is understanding, and justice must begin with understanding. He folded his hands. But before I make any decision today, I need to ask you one more question. Gabe straightened. Caprio looked him directly in the eyes. When was the last time someone told you that you weren't alone? The question hit him like a physical blow, because someone once had. Luis Alvarez, 15 years ago, in the desert, under a sky full of dust and fire. But since then, no one. Gabe struggled to speak, his voice cracking under the weight of years. I can't remember, sir. Caprio nodded. Then let's make today the first time. Judge Caprio leaned back in his chair, letting the weight of Gabe's words settle over the room. The old wooden benches creaked as people shifted, not out of impatience, but out of the emotional heaviness settling on their shoulders. Even Officer Riley Usually, stiff as stone, stood with his jaw tight and arms lowered, no longer postured in suspicion. Grace, sensing the shift, let out a tiny sigh and nuzzled closer into the crook of Gabe's elbow. He stroked her head, grounding himself with each slow breath, as though the puppy was the only thing anchoring him in this moment. After several quiet seconds, Caprio looked at the bailiff. Officer Riley, please retrieve the municipal code section regarding animals in public buildings. Yes, Your Honor. Riley left quickly, boots echoing down the hallway. Caprio turned back to Gabe. Mr. Turner, while Officer Riley checks the code, I want to understand more. You said you spend a lot of time at the VA. How often are you there? 4, sometimes 5 days a week, Gabe answered softly. Physical therapy twice a week, counseling 3 times, medication checks, paperwork. There's always paperwork. Caprio nodded knowingly. And are you currently receiving disability benefits? Barely, Gabe said. $912 a month. It covers food, gas, maybe some dog food. But rent? He shook his head. No chance. Have you applied for housing assistance? I did, Gabe said with a defeated exhale. But the wait list is 6 to 9 months. And that's if your paperwork doesn't get lost. It's already happened twice. Someone in the back whispered, "That's ridiculous." Someone else whispered, "Poor guy." Caprio heard those murmurs, but he didn't scold anyone. Instead, he focused on Gabe with the same steady calm that had grounded so many defendants before him. "Mr. Turner," he said, "do you have any family nearby?" Gabe hesitated. "Not anymore." "What do you mean?" "My parents passed a few years ago. Heart attack and cancer. My younger brothers live down south. They've got their own families. We don't talk much." Caprio read between the lines. When life breaks you, people sometimes step back, not out of cruelty, but because they don't know how to step forward. "And your friend Luis?" Caprio asked gently. "Did you ever meet his family after returning?" Gabe's throat tightened. "No, sir." "Why not?" "Because I didn't think they'd want to see me. I was supposed to come home with him. I didn't. Felt like showing up at their door would be rubbing salt in the wound." He looked down at Grace. "And I've already hurt enough people just by being alive." A gasp rippled across the room. Caprio inhaled sharply. The judge had heard many heartbreaking things in his career, but something about that sentence hit him differently. He leaned forward, his voice thick but steady. "You are not responsible for the grief of others simply because you survived. That is not a burden any human being should carry." Gabe swallowed hard, blinking back tears. Just then, Officer Riley returned, carrying printed sheets of the municipal code. He handed them to the judge. Caprio skimmed them, then shook his head with a small, almost amused sigh. According to this, animals are prohibited inside municipal buildings except in cases where they are serving as certified service animals. Gabe visibly tensed, holding Grace closer. But Caprio continued, raising a finger. It does not specify how the court must handle situations where the animal poses no threat, and there are extenuating circumstances. Riley raised an eyebrow. "So what does that mean, Judge?" "It means," Caprio said, "the law leaves room for compassion, and I intend to use that room." Gabe's shoulders sagged with relief. Caprio set the papers aside. "Mr. Turner, I want you to take a seat in the witness chair. We're going to take this one step at a time." Gabe nodded and lowered himself carefully, adjusting Grace so she lay across his lap. The judge took a deep breath. "All right, Mr. Turner. I'm going to go through these tickets one by one, but before I do," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "I need to ask you something difficult." Gabe braced himself. "Yes, sir." "Do you want to get better?" The question hit the room like a soft explosion. Unexpected. Simple. But devastating. Gabe's brows knit together. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Caprio said, "do you want help? Real help. Housing, treatment, stability. A chance to rebuild. Not just survive day to day." A tear slipped down Gabe's cheek before he could stop it. "Yes," he whispered. "I do. I really do." "Good," Caprio said, nodding firmly. "Because this city has resources. And more importantly, there are people who care. And you deserve support, not punishment." Gabe covered his mouth, overwhelmed. Caprio opened the envelope again, spreading the documents neatly on the bench. The audience leaned forward, as though they could see his thoughts unfolding. "Based on your service record," he said, "your injuries, your circumstances, and the fact that these tickets were accumulated while seeking medical help," He raised his eyes. This court is prepared to dismiss all 9 citations. The room erupted not loudly, but in a breath of collective disbelief. A few people clapped before stopping themselves. The young mother wiped her eyes. Even the businessman in the back lowered his face, swallowing emotion, but Gabe just stared, stunned. I don't understand, he whispered. Caprio smiled gently. You told me earlier that you didn't want pity. Good. Because this isn't pity. This is justice, real justice. He tapped the papers lightly. And justice considers context. When a man risks his life for this country, gets injured in that service, struggles to navigate a complex system, and accumulates fines while getting the treatment he earned, that's not a delinquent. His voice lowered. That is a man this court will stand behind. Gabe shook his head slowly, in disbelief. Thank you, Your Honor. I don't even have words. I'm not finished, Caprio said. Gabe's eyes widened. Caprio looked at Officer Riley. Please, contact Linda Brooks at Providence Housing. Tell her I need an emergency veteran placement today. Yes, Your Honor, Riley said, already moving toward the phone. Also, Caprio continued to call Dr. Ethan Ross at the VA and tell him Mr. Turner needs priority scheduling and assistance applying for enhanced benefits. The courtroom watched, breathless, as Riley made the calls. And one more thing, Caprio said. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small leather checkbook. The sound of the check tearing free echoed louder than it should have. Caprio stepped down from the bench, something he rarely did, and approached Gabe. This, he said, handing him the slip, is a personal check for $500. Not from the court. From me. Gabe stared at it, hands trembling. Judge, Tours can't take this. Yes, you can, Caprio said, because this isn't charity. It's gratitude. You served this country for 20 years. You kept fighting long after you came home, and you saved that little one's life. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. Grace wagged her tail, licking a stray tear from Gabe's hand. And I want you, Caprio continued, to use this for food, warm clothes, and whatever Grace needs. The gallery burst into gentle applause, this time without restraint. Caprio placed a hand on Gabe's shoulder. You are not alone anymore. Gabe broke. Shoulders shaking, he covered his eyes, unable to speak. Grace licked at his chin, whining softly, her tiny body pressing into his chest, as though reminding him that she too was still here, still his. The judge gave him a moment, then quietly returned to the bench. When Gabe finally managed to look up, tears streaking his face, he whispered, "Thank you for seeing me." Caprio smiled, warm and steady. "I didn't just see you, Mr. Turner." He glanced at the gallery, at the faces transformed by what they'd witnessed. We all did. Gabe was still wiping tears from his cheeks when a sound rose from the back of the courtroom, a wooden bench, scraping softly against the floor. Someone stood up, not abruptly, not dramatically, but with the weight of a man who had suddenly realized he could no longer stay seated. "Your Honor," the man said, voice unsteady. May I address the court?" Judge Caprio looked up. The man was in his early 40s, dressed sharply in a tailored navy suit, but his eyes were glassy, red at the edges. He had been sitting quietly through the entire proceeding, unnoticed, a spectator waiting for his own small casilla, speeding ticket later that morning. But now he stepped into the aisle, hands shaking slightly. Caprio considered him for a moment and nodded. "Please state your name for the record." "Marco Alvarez, Your Honor." The surname cracked through the air like a small thunderbolt. Gabe stiffened. "Alvarez." His breath caught. Marco took a step closer, knees almost buckling under the emotional weight. "Your Honor, 2 need to speak to Mr. Turner." Caprio glanced at Gabe. "Are you comfortable with that?" Gabe nodded hesitantly, heart pounding. Marco approached slowly, like a man approaching a memory he had both longed for and dreaded for years. When he reached the witness stand, his voice broke. "You said your friend's name was Luis Alvarez." Gabe swallowed hard. "Yes, Luis. He was my brother," Marco whispered. The courtroom froze. Total stillness. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to hum more softly. Gabe stared at him, eyes wide. The world blurred at the edges. "I'm sorry," he managed to choke out. "Marco, I didn't know how to find you. I didn't know if you'd want to see me. I didn't know if—" Marco closed his eyes, tears slipping down his cheeks. "We tried to find you, Gabe. My mother and we tried. We contacted the unit. We sent letters. But you were gone, moved, lost in the system, and for 15 years, I've wondered if you were even alive." Gabe's throat tightened painfully. Grace whimpered at the sudden tension in his body. "I'm alive," Gabe whispered. "Somehow." Marco nodded shakily. "Luis used to write us letters, every week. And in almost every single one, he talked about you. Said you were brave, loyal. Said you kept him laughing even when the sky was on fire. Said you were his brother." Gabe bowed his head. Tears dripped onto Grace's fur. "I tried to protect him," he whispered. "I know," Marco said gently. "He told us. In his last letter." He reached into his jacket, pulling out a small, worn envelope. The edges were soft, handled too many times. He held it out with trembling fingers. "His final letter," Marco said quietly. "We never showed it to anyone. Not even his commanding officers. But I think he meant it for you too." Gabe hesitated, then took the envelope with both hands, as if accepting something sacred. He unfolded the letter, eyes scanning the handwriting that had once shaped the rhythm of his days overseas. "Dear Mom, dear Marco. If you're reading this, I guess things didn't go the way I hoped. But I need you to know something. If I don't make it home, it's not Gabe's fault. He saved me more times than I can count. He's the brother I got to choose. And if I don't make it, I want him to live enough life for both of us. Tell him he doesn't owe me anything except maybe to keep going. Don't let him quit. He's too good. He's meant for more than war. Please take care of him if you ever find him." Brothers forever. Louis Gabe's breath shattered. He pressed the letter to his forehead, face contorting in a painful mixture of sorrow and relief. Marco stepped closer, voice soft with empathy. "We didn't lose him for nothing, Gabe. He believed in you, completely. And seeing you today, seeing you help that puppy, seeing you still fighting, I finally understand why." Gabe sobbed, shoulders trembling. "And," Marco added, "I need you to know something important. For a long time, I was angry at you." Gabe's heart stopped. "I blamed you for living when he didn't," Marco confessed, shame coloring his voice. "But that wasn't fair. Luis made a choice, the kind of choice only a hero makes. And I see now that the best way to honor that choice is to make sure you don't drown alone." Gabe covered his eyes. Grace climbed onto his chest, licking away the tears. Marco crouched down, speaking with the gentleness of a man letting go of 15 years of grief. "I'm not angry anymore. And my mom, Elena, still keeps Luis's room exactly the way he left it. She prays every night for the brother he wrote about. She would want to meet you. She would want to hug you. She would want to know you're still here." Gabe let out a small, broken sound, a sound of release, a sound of a weight finally beginning to lift. Marco placed a hand on his arm. "Your family, Gabe. You always were. You just forgot. Let us remind you." The courtroom was silent, except for the sound of quiet crying from several people in the gallery. Judge Caprio's voice wavered when he finally spoke. "Mr. Alvarez, thank you. Your words honor your brother's memory more than you know." Marco nodded, wiping his eyes. Then he reached into his pocket again and pulled out a business card. "I own a construction company, Alvarez and Sons. Named it after Luis, though he never got to be part of it. We hire veterans whenever we can. When you're ready, I'd like you to come in for an interview. We'll find something that fits your physical limitations, something meaningful, something steady." Gabe looked at the card as though it were made of gold. I don't deserve that." "You deserve more than you know," Marco said firmly. "And Luis would want this. He'd kick me if I didn't offer." A small laugh broke through Gabe's tears. Marco grinned through his own. "There he is. That's the guy my brother loved." The entire courtroom exhaled, long collective release of tension and empathy. Officer Riley cleared his throat loudly, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. Well, seems like we're all allergic to something in here. Soft laughter rippled through the room. Caprio stood up again. Mr. Turner, Mr. Alvarez, what happened today is extraordinary. This is more than a legal proceeding. It is healing, and healing is rare in a courtroom. He paused, letting the moment breathe. And now, he continued, since Mr. Alvarez still has a speeding case on my docket this morning, laughter bubbled across the room again. Marco chuckled. Yes, Your Honor. Going 47 and a 30, no excuse. Caprio smiled. I think we can resolve that. He stamped the file with a firm thud. Dismissed. Marco blinked. Your Honor, 2 wasn't expecting, I know, Caprio said. Think of it as a small tribute to your brother's sacrifice and to the compassion you extended today. Marco swallowed hard. Thank you. Truly. The judge nodded solemnly. Do me a favor in return. Anything. Take Mr. Turner to lunch. Today. Sit together. Share your stories. Begin whatever comes next. Marco placed a hand on Gabe's shoulder. I'd be honored. Gabe finally looked up, eyes red but brighter than before. I'd like that, he whispered. Caprio folded his hands, voice resonating through the quiet room. Let today serve as a reminder to all of us. Behind every uniform is a human being. Behind every struggle is a story. Sometimes behind a man's brokenness is a brotherhood that refuses to die. A quiet murmur of agreement swept the gallery. And sometimes, Caprio added with a soft smile, glancing at Grace, behind a coat, is something worth protecting. The gallery laughed, warm and gentle. Gabe held Grace closer, her small heartbeat pressed against his chest. For the first time in years, he felt something returning, something he thought had died in the desert with Luis, a sense of belonging, a sense of being seen, a sense of family, hope. And he didn't even realize that Grace, curled in his arms, was wagging her tail not because she understood what was happening, but because she could feel it. Healing, connection, a beginning. The doors of Municipal Court 3B closed softly behind them, but Gabe remained standing in the hallway for several seconds, as though he wasn't sure the floor beneath him was real. The building smelled faintly of old paper and disinfectant, yet every breath felt different, lighter, sharper, impossible. Grace rested against his chest, her warm little head tucked under his chin, sensing the tremble in his body. Marco stood beside him, hands in his pockets, almost shy now that the adrenaline of the courtroom moment had passed. You okay? Marco asked quietly. I don't know, Gabe admitted truthfully. Feels like I'm waking up from a dream I didn't know I was having. Marco chuckled softly. Same. Officer Riley stepped out of the courtroom, holding his phone. Mr. Turner, he said, clearing his throat. I spoke with Linda Brooks. She's expediting your housing placement. Says she'll meet you at the Veterans Housing Complex at 3 o'clock. Today. Gabe blinked. Today? Yes, today. And Dr. Ross wants you to come in this afternoon, too. He's got an opening at 4. Says he'll help you with the disability documentation personally. Gabe stared at him. But how? I mean, why? Riley shrugged but smiled. Because someone finally pushed the right buttons for you. And because you deserve it. That's why. If Gabe had any tears left, they would have fallen right then. Riley then pointed at Grace, and the Humane Society called the courtroom clerk. They got the judge's message. They're ready to help with vet care, food, and whatever that little one needs. Grace wagged her tail at the sound of Riley's voice, as if pleased with the recognition. Riley muttered, Yeah, she's cute, whatever, and walked off before he got emotional again. Marco chuckled. Come on, he said. The judge told me to take you to lunch. And trust me, when Judge Caprio suggests something, you do it. Gabe nodded. Okay. But can we do somewhere casual? I'm not really dressed for anything fancy. Marco grinned. Brother, you saved my brother's life. You can walk into any restaurant in Providence in pajamas, and no one would dare judge you. But don't worry, we'll go somewhere calm." They walked out into the crisp late morning air. The sky was a cold, pale blue, the kind that makes sunlight look thin but hopeful. The breeze lifted the ends of Gabe's old jacket, and for the first time in months, he didn't feel ashamed of how he looked. Marco led him to a modest little diner a few blocks away. Red vinyl booths, clinking mugs, the smell of coffee and buttered toast. It was warm, familiar, and somehow exactly right. They slid into a booth, Grace settling between them with a soft thump. The Cervera, cheerful woman with silver hair came over and gasped softly. "Oh my goodness, look at this beautiful girl. What's her name?" "Grace," Gabe said. "Well, she's perfect," the server declared, giving the puppy a gentle scratch. "Coffee for both of you?" "Yes, please," Marco said. Gabe nodded. "Yeah, coffee sounds nice." Grace sniffed the table, curious. After the server left, there was a moment of quiet. Not awkward silence, just the pause between two people who suddenly had too much to say and didn't know where to start. Marco finally broke it. "Gabe, I have to be honest," he said softly. "Before today, I wasn't sure how I'd react if I ever met you. For years, I thought of you as the man my brother died for. And that thought hurt. But hearing you today, seeing you with Grace, remembering Luis's letters, I realized something." He looked Gabe square in the eyes. "My brother didn't die for a stranger. He died for family." Gabe felt something shift deep inside him, something that had been locked in place for years. "And I want you to let us be family again," Marco said gently. "If you want that." Gabe didn't trust himself to speak. He nodded slowly. The server returned with coffee and menus. "Take your time, sweeties," she said with a wink, then walked off. Gabe wrapped his hands around the hot mug, drawing warmth into his fingers. "Marco," he finally said, voice trembling, "I don't know how to be part of something anymore." "You don't need to know," Marco replied. "You just need to show up. We'll figure out the rest together." Gabe looked at Grace, as though she could explain this surreal moment. Grace responded by putting her paw on Gabe's wrist, looking up with her soft brown eyes. Marco laughed. "See? She gets it." They ordered lunch simple sandwiches, hot soup, and for the first time in a long while, Gabe actually tasted the food instead of just swallowing it. Marco told him about life back home, about their mother Elena and how she kept Luis's memory alive every day. He told stories about growing up with Luis, how he used to sing horribly in the shower, how he once tried to rescue a stray pigeon, how he could never stay mad for more than 20 seconds. Gabe laughed for the first time in months, and then it was Gabe's turn. He talked about basic training, about long nights overseas, about the stupid jokes he and Luis told to stay sane. Marco listened like every word was a piece of his brother he thought he'd lost. At one point, Marco had to wipe his eyes, then muttered, "Great," crying in a diner. "My mother would say, that means I'm finally human." Gabe smiled softly. After lunch, they stepped outside. "I'll drive you to the housing office," Marco said, "and then to the VA." "You don't have to do all that," Gabe said. Marco raised an eyebrow. "You're stuck with me now. Get used to it." Gabe nodded, overwhelmed. As they walked to Marco's car, Grace trotted proudly beside them in her makeshift sling. Marco opened the back door carefully. Princess Grace gets the back seat. "Don't worry, I'll put a towel down." Gabe chuckled. "Princess Grace." Marco shrugged. "What?" "Look at her. She radiates royalty." Grace barked once, as if agreeing. Marco drove them to the Veterans Housing Complex, a group of newly refurbished brick buildings surrounded by clean sidewalks and small fenced-in grassy areas. Linda Brooks, a tall woman with curly hair and a bright smile, was waiting at the front entrance with a folder in hand. "You must be Gabe," she said warmly, "and this must be Grace. She's even cuter than I imagined." Gabe blinked. "You imagined her." Linda laughed. "Judge Caprio called me personally. He called her a very important puppy." His exact words. Gabe choked on a laugh. Linda led them inside. We have a unit open on the second floor. It's small but clean, warm, and safe, fully furnished. And we fast-tracked your application. All we need is your signature. Gabe's steps faltered. My signature? Yes, Linda said kindly. You can move in today. He stopped walking. Move in today. Today. Not next month. Not next year. Today. Marco rested a hand on his shoulder. Take the key, Gabe. Gabe nodded numbly. When Linda placed the key into his palm, he stared at it as though it were a sacred artifact. Something impossibly rare. Something impossibly fragile. Something he thought he'd never hold again. A home. A place to sleep without fear. A door that locked. A bathroom. A bed. He didn't realize he was crying again until Grace licked the tears off his hand. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you so much. Linda squeezed his hand. You deserve stability, and we're here to make sure you get it. She walked them upstairs to Unit 2B. The door opened with a soft click. The room smelled faintly of fresh paint and pine-scented cleaner. There was a small kitchenette, a twin bed made neatly with gray sheets, a wooden dresser, a tiny table with 2 chairs, and a folded blanket draped across the foot of the bed. Sunlight streamed through the window onto the floor, warm and golden. Grace wriggled to the edge of Gabe's arms and jumped down, sniffing everything excitedly. She approved. Gabe stood in the doorway, gripping the frame, his breath shallow. Gabe, Marco asked softly. Gabe stepped inside. He ran his hand along the countertop, the dresser, the bed. He sank down onto the mattress, pressing both palms against the blanket. Grace hopped up and curled beside him. And then he broke down, not from sadness, not from grief, but from the overwhelming shock of safety. Marco knelt in front of him, clasping his shoulders. You're home, Gabe. You hear me? You're home. Gabe covered his face, shaking. I didn't think I'd get back here. Not ever. Marco nodded. But you did. They sat together for a long time, letting the moment settle. After Gabe calmed, Marco said, We've got to get you to the VA appointment. Ready? Gabe looked around the room again. Ready. He stood, cradled Grace, and walked to the door. Before he left, he looked back at the roomette. The sunlight, the blanket, the space waiting for him, the beginning. Thank you, he whispered again. As they left the building, Marco locked arms, with him not as charity, not as pity, but as family. And for the first time in a very long time, Gabe didn't pull away. He let himself be held up. He let himself be led forward. Grace trotted beside him, tail wagging, as if she already knew. Their new life had just begun. For the first time in months, maybe years, Gabe walked into the VA without that familiar knot of dread twisting in his stomach. The automatic doors slid open, releasing a faint smell of antiseptic and old coffee. Usually that scent alone made his pulse spike memories of long, confusing appointments, endless paperwork, and the heavy weight of being just another case file. But today felt different. Maybe it was because Marco walked beside him like a steady anchor. Maybe it was the warm pressure of Grace's little paws on his arms. Maybe it was because he wasn't walking in as a man barely surviving. He was walking in as someone the world had just decided was worth fighting for, and someone worth believing in. The receptionist looked up as they approached. Her eyes softened immediately at the sight of the puppy. Well, hello there, she said, her voice lifting. And who is this precious girl? This is Grace, Gabe replied. And this is Mr. Turner, Marco added with a proud smile. He's here to meet with Dr. Ross. Of course, the receptionist said warmly. He's expecting you. I'll let him know you're here. As she made the call, Marco nudged Gabe gently. See, people light up when they see her. She's like a tiny golden diplomat. Gabe chuckled, shaking his head. I think she's more famous than I am already. She deserves it, Marco said. You do too, whether you believe that yet or not. Before Gabe could respond, a door opened, and a tall, soft-spoken man in a white coat emerged. Dr. Ethan Ross looked to be in his late 40s-skinned eyes, tired smile, salt and pepper beard. Someone who had seen a lot, carried a lot, and somehow still stayed gentle. "Mr. Turner," he asked. "Yes, sir," Gabe said, shifting Grace carefully. Dr. Ross nodded approvingly. "I'm glad you came. Judge Caprio gave me a call, filled me in. Come on back, both of you." Even the way he said both of you lifted some invisible weight from Gabe's shoulders. They followed him into a modest exam room, nothing fancy, but clean, quiet, safe. Grace immediately sniffed the corners, tail wagging. Dr. Ross smiled. "She's curious." "That's a good sign." Gabe sat on the edge of the exam table. Grace hopped onto his lap and curled into a warm ball. "So," Dr. Ross began, pulling up a chair. "Let's talk." And talk they did. At first, slowly, then deeper, then honestly. Gabe told him about the chronic back pain that flared up like fire whenever he lifted something wrong, about the shrapnel that still lingered near his spine, about the headaches that hit like sudden storms. He told him about the nightmares, the ones so vivid they left him shaking at dawn, the panic attacks that came out of nowhere, like landmines lying in wait, the guilt that clung to him like a second skin. He even told him about the mornings he didn't want to wake up. And Dr. Ross didn't flinch once, didn't judge, didn't rush. He listened. Then he asked questions, not clinical or cold, but gentle and precise, like someone carefully cleaning a wound. When they were done, Dr. Ross looked Gabe squarely in the eyes. "You've been trying to carry all of this alone," he said softly, "and that's not how this works. You need support, medical, emotional, financial, structural, and we're going to get you that." Gabe swallowed the sudden lump in his throat. "I'm not used to things working out," he admitted. "I know," Dr. Ross said, "but they can, and they will. You're not the first veteran to walk this path, and you won't be the last. But beginning today, you don't walk it alone." He tapped a few notes into Gabe's file. "Here's what we're going to do," Dr. Ross continued. "I'm putting you into the Accelerated Benefits program. We'll start physical therapy twice a week, custom plan, focused on strengthening without increasing pain. You'll be assigned a trauma counselor, not group counseling unless you want it, but one-on-one with someone who knows combat PTSD. We'll adjust your medication plan, and I'll personally oversee your disability reevaluation. It's criminal you're only getting $900 a month." Gabe blinked. "But that sounds like it'll take months." "Actually," Dr. Ross said with a smile, "it'll take a week, maybe less." Gabe stared at him. Dr. Ross leaned back, arms crossed. "You have people advocating for you now. Doors open quicker when the right hands knock on them." Gabe let out a slow exhale. For the first time, hope didn't feel like a cruel joke. "And now," Dr. Ross added, "let's talk about Grace." Grace perked up at the sound of her name, tail wagging. "She's young," Dr. Ross said, "but she shows signs of natural emotional attunement. With proper training, she could be certified as an emotional support animal. That would give you housing protections, travel allowances, and additional emotional support during PTSD episodes." Gabe looked down at the puppy. "She already helps more than she knows." "I believe it," Dr. Ross said warmly. "She's part of your treatment plan now. Count on her." When the appointment ended, Dr. Ross walked them out personally. "Come back tomorrow at 10, he said. "We start your new life then." Gabe shook his hand. "Thank you," he whispered. Dr. Ross squeezed his shoulder. "Don't thank me yet. We've got a long road ahead, but it's a road you're not walking alone anymore." Outside, the winter sun glowed pale above the rooftops. Marco exhaled, clapping Gabe lightly on the back. "Well, how'd it go?" I think I finally have help," Gabe said, awe still in his voice. Marco grinned. "Good. Because now you've got a housing appointment done, a VA plan in motion, and a brother to annoy for the rest of your life." Gabe laughed, shaking his head. "You're not letting me go, are you?" "Nope," Marco replied proudly. "You're stuck with me." They drove back to the housing complex so Gabe could settle in. Grace bounded ahead into the room as though she already owned the place. She sniffed every corner, then leapt onto the bed, rolling on the blanket like it was the greatest thing she'd ever seen. Gabe stood in the doorway, watching her, with a smile that reached all the way to his eyes. Marco leaned against the wall, arms folded. "Feels different, doesn't it?" "Yeah," Gabe said softly. "It really does." "What's next?" Marco asked. Gabe took a long breath. The truth was still forming in him, but it felt right. I think I'm ready to start trying," he said. "To heal, to live, to belong somewhere again." Marco nodded, satisfied. "Good, because I have something else to ask you." Gabe raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" Marco hesitated, then pulled a small envelope from his pocket, the same kind used by the diner to give receipts. He handed it to Gabe. "What is this?" "A note from my mother," Marco said quietly. "She wanted you to have it." Gabe froze. "Your mother? But I haven't even met her yet." "I called her," Marco admitted. "Told her what happened in court. She cried so hard I thought she was going to pass out. Then she insisted I give you this." Gabe opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a small handwritten note on delicate floral stationery. "Mi hijo Gabe, my son Gabe. If my Luis gave his life to protect you, then I will give my heart to help you live yours. You are part of our family. Come meet me when you are ready. I will be waiting with open arms. Con todo mi cariño, Elena Alvarez." Tears blurred the words. Gabe pressed the note to his chest, overwhelmed by a kind of love he hadn't felt in decades. Marco stepped forward, his voice gentle. "I think she's been waiting for you for a long time." Gabe wiped his eyes, breath-catching. I don't know what to say." "Then just say yes," Marco said softly. "Say you'll let us be part of your life." Gabe nodded. "Yes, I'd like that." Marco smiled. "Good, because she already started cooking." Gabe laughed, tears running freely. They spent the next hour unpacking what little Gabe owned, folding old clothes, arranging toiletries, setting a small bowl for Grace. Marco insisted on driving to the nearest store to buy essentials: fresh socks, decent shampoo, a warm coat, a bag of high-quality puppy food. Gabe protested half-heartedly, but Marco ignored every refusal. "You're not spending another night in that old jacket," Marco declared, handing him a thick navy parka. Gabe touched the sleeve reverently. "It's been a long time since I had something new." "Well," Marco said, shrugging, "get used to it. You've got a whole family now." As the afternoon darkened into early evening, Marco stood at the doorway, ready to leave. "You need anything, you call me." No excuses. "I will," Gabe said. "And tomorrow," Marco added, "we'll go together to my mom's. She's making arroz con pollo, and she's already planning to fatten you up." Gabe grinned. "I'm ready." Marco pointed sternly. "Be prepared for relentless hugging." I think I'll be okay with that." Marco smiled wide. "Good night, brother." "Good night," Gabe replied. After Marco left, the room became quiet, but not the lonely kind of quiet Gabe knew too well. This was gentle, peaceful, safe. Gabe sat on the edge of the bed. Grace hopped onto his lap, curling into a warm little ball. He stroked her fur, his hand steady, his breathing calm. He looked around the room, the soft light from the window, the clean sheets, the simple furniture. It wasn't much, but it was his space, his beginning. Gabe lay down, Grace on his chest, and closed his eyes. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he slept. And he slept without fear. Gabe woke to something unfamiliar. For a moment, he didn't recognize the ceiling above him, the soft white paint, the morning light spilling through the curtains, the quiet hum of central heating. Then he felt a warm weight on his chest. Grace, sprawled with all four paws in the air, snoring softly. He smiled. A real smile, not the forced kind he'd worn for years. He sat up slowly, letting Grace roll into his lap. The room still felt surreal, like it belonged to someone else, and he was trespassing in a dream that would end any moment. But it didn't end. The floor was warm. The sheets were soft. His back didn't ache from sleeping in a car seat. The tiny kitchenette gleamed with simple, perfect possibility. He had slept through the night. No nightmares. No jolting awake with a racing heart. Just sleep. He whispered, "We made it, girl." Grace thumped her tail. The knock at the door startled him. A light, tentative knock, the kind someone uses when they don't want to frighten whoever might be on the other side. Gabe opened the door to find a small man holding 2 paper bags. "Delivery for a Mr. Turner?" he asked with a kind but uncertain smile. That's me. These are from Mrs. Alvarez." Gabe blinked. "What?" The man handed him the bag swarm, fragrant, heavy. "She said to tell you, you are too thin and she refuses to let you meet her looking like you need rescuing." Her words, not mine. Gabe laughed, embarrassed, and touched all at once. The man nodded, tipped his cap, and left. Inside the bags, homemade tamales, a stack of warm tortillas wrapped in cloth, arroz con leche in a glass jar, and a note. "Eat. You need strength for the hug I'm going to give you later." Mama Elena Gabe sat at the small table, Grace curled at his feet, and ate the first real homemade meal he'd had in years. Each bite tasted like warmth, like comfort, like someone's care seeping into every grain of rice. He wiped his eyes more than once. 2 hours later, Marco arrived with a cheerful honk from the parking lot. "You better not come out looking half dead," Marco called through the open window when Gabe stepped outside. "I ate," Gabe protested. "Good. Because my mother would have driven here herself if you didn't." Grace bounded ahead, ears flopping, and Marco opened the back door for her. "The princess returns," he said with mock reverence. The drive to the Alvarez home felt surreal. The last time Gabe had seen Luis alive, they were riding in a convoy half a world away. Now, he was heading to meet the family Luis always spoke about, the people he loved more than anything. Marco pulled into the driveway of a modest cream-colored house with a garden full of bright yellow flowers. A wind chime tinkled softly from the porch. "She's inside," Marco said. "Ready?" "No," Gabe admitted honestly, "but let's do it anyway." Before Marco could knock, the door swung open. Elena Alvarez stood in the doorway, tiny gray-haired, eyes brimming. She took one step forward, saw Gabe, and froze. Her hand rose to her mouth. "Mijo," she whispered. Gabe felt his chest crack in half. And then she went to him, not walking, not running, but moving with a force that defied the stiffness in her joints, the years of grief she carried. She wrapped her arms around him, her cheek pressed against his chest. Gabe hugged her back, burying his face in her shoulder. She cried, not the sharp, painful cries of fresh loss, but the soft, trembling cries of someone letting go of years of wondering, wishing, waiting. "You're home," she murmured. "You're finally home." Grace wiggled between their legs, whining softly. Elena knelt slowly, cupped Grace's face in her hands, and kissed her forehead. "And you brought him back to us." Inside the house, photographs covered the walls, family portraits, childhood memories, and countless photos of Luis in uniform. One in particular caught Gabe's eye. Luis grinning, arm slung around a younger Marco. Elena noticed his gaze. "He talked about you all the time," she said, touching the frame. "Said you were stubborn, brave, loyal. He loved you like a brother." Gabe bit the inside of his cheek to keep from breaking. Marco put a hand on his shoulder. "You were his family. You still are." They sat at the kitchen table, Elena insisting on feeding them even though it was barely noon. Gabe told her stories he'd never told anyone else. The time Luis improvised a birthday celebration in the desert with a single candle stuck into a protein bar. The way he sang horribly on purpose to make the squad laugh. How he whispered prayers under his breath every time they rolled out, not for himself, but for everyone else. Elena hung on to every word, like each one was a piece of her son she got to hold again. When Gabe told her about the convoy attack, about how Luis shielded him with his own body, her hand shook, but her voice didn't. "He protected you because he loved you," she said softly. "Do not punish yourself for surviving. My son would not want that." Gabe nodded, tears falling freely. Marco cleared his throat. "Mom has something for you." Elena disappeared into a back room and returned with a small wooden box. She set it in front of Gabe. He hesitated. I can't." "Yes," she said firmly. "You can." Gabe opened the box. Inside was a silver bracelet symbol, engraved with one word. "Hermano, brother." Gabe covered his mouth. "Elena, you are not replacing him," she said gently. "No one can. But he chose you, and you are ours, always." Grace climbed onto Gabe's lap again, sensing his trembling. They spent hours talking, sharing stories, healing in the small ways humans heal when they decide to sit with their grief instead of running from it. Before leaving, Elena cupped Gabe's face in her hands. "Come back tomorrow," she insisted. "You and Grace. I'm making pozole." Gabe laughed, wiping his eyes. "Yes, ma'am." On the drive back, Marco said, "You know, you handled that better than most people would." "I didn't handle anything," Gabe said quietly. "They handled me." Marco grinned. "That's what family does." When Gabe returned to his apartment, Grace trotted in like she owned the place, which, in a way, she did. She hopped onto the bed, rolling on her back, demanding belly rubs as if to say, "See? This is home." Gabe gave her more than one. As evening settled, Gabe sat at the small table with the bracelet resting before him. He traced the engraving with a fingertip. "Hermano," he whispered. "We're okay, Luis. I'm okay. I promise." Grace barked softly as if agreeing. The next morning, Gabe walked into Dr. Ross's office again, but something had changed. He stood taller. He breathed easier. He carried himself like a man beginning to remember who he had been before the world wore him down. Dr. Ross noticed immediately. "You look different." "I feel different," Gabe admitted. "Good. Let's keep going." Over the next weeks, Gabe began physical therapy. Slowly at first, stretching, careful lifting, rebuilding muscles that had been neglected. Counseling sessions followed. Hard ones that forced him to name things he had avoided for years. Grace came to every appointment. When Gabe's breath quickened, she put her paw on his knee. When he cried, she nudged his hand. When he panicked, she pressed her body against him until the world steadied. Within a month, she was officially certified as an emotional support animal. And within 6 weeks, Gabe received his disability reevaluation. It wasn't $900 a month anymore. It was enough to live with dignity. Then Marco came with another surprise. "You ready for this?" "For what?" "You're starting at Alvarez & Sons. Light duty, flexible hours, good pay, health insurance." Gabe blinked. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," Marco said. "You want a second chance. We're giving you one." And Gabe took it. His first day on the job, he arrived early, heart pounding. Grace, sitting proudly in the truck seat beside him, wearing her little red vest. When he stepped out, 3 veterans from the crew approached, grinning, extending hands, fists, and small nods of understanding. "Welcome to the team," one said. "You'll fit right in," another added. And he did. Slowly, steadily, beautifully. By spring, Gabe was stronger. Not healed, not yet. Healing is a road without a finish line. But he was walking that road with people who wouldn't let him fall behind. Marco, Elena, the guys at the job, Dr. Ross, and Grace, always Grace. One afternoon, after work, Gabe sat on his apartment steps watching the sunset while Grace gnawed on a toy at his feet. He took out the wooden box Elena had given him and slipped the bracelet onto his wrist. Hermano. A reminder of who he lost. A reminder of who he still had. A reminder of who he was becoming. He looked up at the sky, painted in colors only evening can create, and for the first time in years, he felt peace. Real peace. Hope didn't just live in the form of a puppy anymore. Hope lived in him. In the end, Gabe's journey reminds us that healing rarely happens alone. It takes compassion, connection, and the courage to let others walk beside us. His story is a testament to the truth that second chances are not a gift. They are a collaboration between those who extend them and those who dare to accept them. If you've ever felt lost, broken, or forgotten, know this: your current chapter does not define your entire book. There is always room for redemption, for rebuilding, for hope. Share in the comments what part of Gabe's story spoke to you most, and if you want more stories of justice, compassion, and humanity, make sure to subscribe.